You guys already know what it is. Real G's come from California, America, mother.
Yes, they absolutely do, and the Diaz brothers are nothing less than a testament to that claim. Nick and Nate Diaz have left an indelible mark on the world of mixed martial arts with their no-nonsense attitude, relentless fighting style,
where Anderson's head is at right now,
and willingness to speak their minds.
Yeah, Conor McGregor, you're taking everything I work for, mother. I'm gonna fight your.
They've become icons in the sport. Their influence extends beyond their professional records, inspiring countless fighters and fans with their authenticity and resilience. These brothers are not just fighters, they are symbols of the fighting spirit. The story of Nick and Nate Diaz is not just one of athletic prowess, but also of perseverance and grit. This is the story of the Diaz brothers.
Surprise, surprise! The king is back!
The early years. The legendary pair's story begins in the 209 of Stockton, California, a city known for its gritty urban landscape and challenging social environment. Nick Diaz was born in August of 1983, with brother Nate being born in April of 1985, almost 2 years later. Growing up, Nick and Nate faced numerous adversities that tested their resolve. With their father's neglect of the family, their mother had to work multiple jobs to support the family, and the brothers often found themselves navigating the complexities of a neighborhood rife with gang activity and violence. Despite these hardships, or perhaps because of them, the Diaz brothers developed a toughness and resilience that would become hallmarks of their later careers.
He doesn't do MMA to be popular. Nick doesn't do MMA to get a pat on the back. Nick doesn't train and fight to get people's approval. Nick does it to survive, because he knows this is his one shot.
Nate and his sister would mostly watch cartoons all day, unaware of their family situation. However, older brother Nick was well aware of the saying and would try to make something out of himself. The transformative moment for Nick and Nate had come when they discovered Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
I was like 15, 16, sophomore year, high school. And that's when I met Steve East. And I remember training with Steve every day for months, and then I finally realized that he learned from Cesar Gracie. And I'm like, who's Cesar Gracie? And I'm like, you're telling me like there's cousins and like, you know, I'm trying to figure out the whole family tree thing.
But it was Nick who was the first to start and develop an interest in martial arts, previously dipping into other forms such as Sambo, Karate, and Aikido. Nate was regularly getting into fights at school, with teachers telling him his best chance at a future was staying out of prison.
I'm waking up 6th grade out my window, 12:30 a.m. On a Friday night, and I'm waking up to all kinds of noise out my window, and all these guys, whoa, and I come outside, and my brother and 20 of the homies from the neighborhood are talking about, we're just at this party, we f*** these dudes at the whole party. We're like, us four were back to back against the wall fighting these motherfuckers. Yeah. And everybody's talking about the whole fight. I'm just like sitting there like, wow. Yeah. Man, I can't wait to fight with you guys somewhere, you know, just right off the bat. I grew up, and everything was every weekend when somebody was fighting.
Nick, wanting to give his younger brother something to do, invited Nate to come along with him and start training. Knowing that there was little else in his life, Nate agreed to start training alongside his brother. The brothers were the youngest in their gym, meaning they would regularly have to spar with much older guys. Nate at first wasn't quite interested in jiu-jitsu, but ultimately what kept him coming back was that after each training session, the older guys in the class would usually buy him and his brother a burrito from the food truck that pulled up near the gym each night.
He started training with the guys. He got me into training with them. 14 to 15, then I learned about Gracie Jiu-Jitsu and about how if you were a blue belt, you could take out anybody in the world, any size. And I watched all the Gracie in action tapes, all that stuff, and I was like, wow, I already feel like I could whip everybody's ass. Imagine if I learned this shit. So yeah, that kicked off right there.
For Nate and his brother, training would mean they would get to eat that day, as they were usually starving at home. Attending primarily for nutrition, before Nate knew it, he was a blue belt, under the tutelage of Cesar Gracie. The brothers honed their skills on the mat, learning the art of submission and control. BJJ became more than just a sport, it was a lifeline, providing structure and purpose. As they progressed, their natural talent and relentless work ethic led them to compete in local and national tournaments. Along with that, the brothers would engage in unsanctioned, bare-knuckle MMA fights. This foundation in martial arts paved the way for their entry into professional fighting, and the opportunity for them to expand on their arsenal of martial arts, having now planted a firm base. Nick and Nate now locked onto the fighting path, aiming to take the lessons from the streets of Stockton to the highest levels of MMA competition. The tragic death of Nick Diaz's high school girlfriend.
I'd like to dedicate this performance tonight, this whole night, and everything to a few friends of mine that passed away. First off, a special girl, very special girl. in my life named Stephanie Wise. Okay.
It was now time for the eldest of the brothers, Nick, to take to the pro MMA scene. Nick was set to make his pro debut shortly after his 18th birthday in 2001. However, a life-changing tragedy had occurred just days before the bout. Nick's girlfriend Stephanie had passed away after committing suicide. The loss was a pivotal moment that shaped his path as a fighter. Nick has spoken about how the incident motivated him to succeed in martial arts, a promise he made to her memory.
Before I had my first pro fight, July 5th, 2000, Bart had a party at his house. The night before, Stephanie had told me she loved me. After the party, I was going to go back to her house with her brother. He was my best friend. Some friends weren't doing well and headed to my house, so I had to go. An hour later, I got a call from her mom saying, "Are you with Stephanie?" She came straight to my house to get me, took me up and down the frontage road on Highway 99 by my grandma's house next to her trailer park. There was a wreck on the freeway. I jumped the fence and saw only one car and ambulances. She had walked and killed herself on the freeway. The girl I loved more than anything had tried to kill herself for the third time and succeeded. She was going to go to college. She was an avid student and was doing everything I couldn't while living in a trailer park where everyone was doing dope. Meanwhile, I focused my whole high school years worried about what her and her friends would think if I lost a fight to her ex-boyfriend and football friends. There was no way I was going to go to school. I had no money, no car. I would have driven there and stopped her. After that, I was grown up. It was all over. I wasn't a kid anymore. I won my first fight in the first round with a choke, and all I could think about was her, just like when I was in school. I would run 7 miles and back to her grave just to promise her I would make it as a fighter like she knew, and had told me she knew and was proud of me.
Diaz had now made a meaningful promise, somehow scraping something good out of the situation. He was now greatly determined to storm the MMA scene and rise to the top. The rise of Nick Diaz. Nick Diaz's professional debut in 2001 marked the beginning of not one, but two storied careers in mixed martial arts. Nick kicked off his pro career by giving his record an injection of victory, defeating fellow debutant Mike Wick by submission. He had been quoted saying, "I won my first fight in the first round with a choke, and all I could think about was her, just like when I was in school." Diaz quickly distinguished himself in the sport. Following another win in the IFC, Nick competed in the Ultimate Athletes One Night King of the Mountain welterweight tournament in 2002, fighting 3 times in one night. He defeated Blaine Tyler and Adam Lynn before ultimately being smashed by Jeremy Jackson, his only TKO by ref loss until 2021. His tenacity and skill inside the octagon continued to display, leading him to become the first WEC welterweight champion, defeating Joe Hurley with a Kimura submission. Following that, he would avenge his loss from Jeremy Jackson, stopping him twice in the 2 consecutive rematches that came. The second win came at his UFC debut at UFC 44 in 2003, marking the start of his journey with the promotion. Nick's initial UFC run was a roller coaster ride. Having next knocked out Robbie Lawler, he went on to achieve a 6-4 record, but it was marked by 3 consecutive decision losses. Despite these setbacks, Diaz rebounded with 2 consecutive wins. His victory over Brazilian newcomer Gleison Tibau at UFC 65 seemed to solidify his place in the UFC, and it looked like he was here to stay. However, despite this and the reassurance of another fight, Diaz surprised everyone by signing with the Gracie Fighting Championships and leaving the UFC behind. GFC had slated him to face Thomas Denny in January 2007, but unfortunately, the event was cancelled due to poor ticket sales. Diaz's career took an unexpected turn, leaving fans wondering about his next move. Nick would keep the ball rolling when Pride had stepped in to offer him a 2-fight deal, to which he signed. His tenure with Pride was marked by a pivotal fight against Takanori Gomi at Pride 33. Nick continued to make waves in MMA, competing and dominating in Elite XC and Dream, with his only setback being a doctor's stoppage against KJ Nunes. However, Nick's most dominant form would come during and around the time period of his legendary Strikeforce run from 2008 to 2011. He went on a dominant run of 11 fights unbeaten, mostly headlined by his rampage through the Strikeforce welterweight division. Here, he embarked on a completely vertical uprise, finishing close to anyone that stood in his path. Following 5 consecutive finishes across different promotions, with the leading 2 in Strikeforce, he captured the championship in 2010 by finishing Mariusz Zaromskis in the first round, making the start of a dominant reign. He went on to defend the title 3 times in a row, avenging his loss to KJ Nunes along the way. During his reign, he also took to Dream, submitting Hayato Sakurai, continuing his path of tapping out Japanese MMA legends. The true highlight of his rise would come by the way of his final Strikeforce bout, finishing Paul Daly in an absolute thriller. Truly a fight for the ages, arguably the greatest one-round MMA fight of all time. The rise of Nate Diaz. Nate Diaz's ascent in professional fighting began at the tender age of 19 in 2004. With a few amateur matches under his belt, he stepped into the limelight, shouldering the expectations set by his brother's early success in the UFC. Nate's shoes had already seemed to fit the footprints of Nick, taking to Strikeforce and WEC in the beginning of his pro career, kicking off his first 2 years with a strong 6-1. Diaz was lined up for a WEC lightweight title shot. However, things didn't go his way here, but despite the setback against champion Hermes Franca, Nate's resilience shone through. Marked up by a mix of anticipation and pressure, in 2007 he stepped into the Ultimate Fighter house with a legacy to uphold. As he entered the 5th season of the Ultimate Fighter competition, Nate was known as the younger Diaz, competing in the lightweight division where his brother Nick had already made a mark with notable victories, standing at 2-0 in the UFC.
Nothing against a gay dude, to be honest with you. If you're gay, you're gay, but these dudes ain't even gay. They're just acting gay and they're making us look bad. They're professional fighters that act like it, you know?
His performance on the reality series was nothing short of remarkable. Nate didn't just participate, he dominated, submitting opponent after opponent, including Gray Maynard, showcasing exceptional grappling skills. This was a clear indication that Nate was not there to live in anyone's shadow. His victory over Manny Gamburian in the tough finale put him on the radar in the lightweight division, and it looks certain he posed a great threat to anyone in his way.
On behalf of the UFC, you are the lightweight Ultimate Fighter. You get the 6-figure contract with the UFC.
This early display of skill and determination set Nate on a path of consistency that even outshone Nick's record at the time, with an impressive 5 consecutive UFC wins, and 8 if you really want to count tough wins. This streak was a display of his evolving skill set, with each win adding to his growing reputation. However, the journey wasn't without its challenges. Despite submitting Melvin Gillard, the W was surrounded by some critical L's. Nate's momentum was halted with losses to seasoned competitors like Clay Guida and Joe Stevenson. Yet, even in defeat, Nate's fighting spirit was evident. He brought excitement to the octagon, regularly earning performance bonuses for his efforts, a clear crowd favorite for his relentless approach. His prowess in boxing and grappling was evident, but finding the right competitive form was a work in progress. A pivotal moment came after a loss to Gray Maynard, prompting Nate to make a strategic shift and venture into the welterweight division. With Nick exploring opportunities outside the UFC, Nate tested his mettle at 170 pounds. Initial success was promising, but as the level of competition intensified, it became apparent that welterweight was not his optimal class. In 2010, at UFC Fight Night 20, Rory McDonald's dominant performance over Nate was a stark reminder of this reality. Undeterred, UFC 135 saw Nate return to the lightweight division, where he would remain absent from the welterweight scene for half a decade. This period of recalibration was anything but a decline. It was a resurgence. Nate's comeback was emphatic, with submission victories over Takanori Gomi and Jim Miller, and a remarkable showdown with Donald Cowboy Cerrone, solidifying his status as a formidable contender in his rightful division. This phase of his career was marked by a series of memorable battles that not only entertained fans but also solidified his place in the sport. Nick Diaz's rivalry with GSP. In the midst of Nate's success, brother Nick was still out there active in the fighting world. As Strikeforce began its integration with the UFC, the stage was set for Nick Diaz's much-awaited return to the UFC octagon. Nick, renowned for his electrifying presence and the drama he brought to every fight, was poised for a monumental clash. He was slated to go head-to-head with George St. Pierre in a titanic champion vs champion super fight. However, Diaz's absence from the promotional press conferences in Canada and Las Vegas led to a dramatic turn of events, resulting in his removal from the marquee matchup.
You know, I've been saying about Nick Diaz forever, if Nick Diaz would play the game just this much, there's a lot of things we don't like to do. For instance, the traveling. When you do all this press stuff, and it's the same questions over and over again, but you're talking to different people in different areas who haven't heard the answers to these questions yet.
A little bit different day than you expected today.
Yeah, it's definitely an odd one. All the things that had happened with Diaz over the week, I just started getting pissed, and I said, that's it, man. This is it. This kid's not going to show up in Vegas. Didn't show up in Toronto. What else isn't he going to show up for? Is he not going to show up for the fight? I'm not going to risk that. Yeah, no, I'm done.
You said that he looked you in the eye and he lied to you. Can you ever take his word again, or is that trust gone?
I would never accept his word again.
Instead, Diaz was matched up against BJ Penn, and the two faced off in October 2011 at UFC 137. Diaz emerged victorious by unanimous decision, making a triumphant return to the UFC. His post-fight moment became iconic in MMA circles when he boldly proclaimed his thoughts on George St. Pierre's absence, suggesting fear rather than injury was the reason for St. Pierre's withdrawal.
I see you walking around, you've been screaming George, even though you just beat BJ Penn in an outstanding fight. What's on your mind right now?
I don't think George is hurt. I think he's scared. I think he's scared to fight everybody right now. What's up? Where you at, George?
A big victory for you.
This call-out resonated with fans and fighters alike, cementing Nick's status as a fearless competitor, unafraid to speak his mind, a signature Diaz trait. The UFC's vision of a blockbuster bout featuring GSP and Nick Diaz, a meeting of two formidable figures in the sport, was highly anticipated. Diaz, carrying the Strikeforce champion's prestige, was set to challenge the UFC's finest. However, an unforeseen injury to GSP altered the course, leading Diaz to vie for the interim title against Carlos Condit at UFC 143. Their encounter was a marathon of skill and endurance, lasting 5 intense rounds and becoming one of the most debated title fights in history. Despite a split in public opinion favoring Diaz, it was Condit who claimed victory through a decision that remains contentious.
Give us your thoughts on the decision.
You know, I'm not going to accept the fact that this was a loss. You know, I don't need this. You know what I mean? I pushed this guy backwards the whole time. He ran for me the whole fight. I landed the harder shots. He ran the whole time. He kicked me in my leg with little baby leg kicks the whole fight. I don't want to play this game no more.
The fans' yearning for the GSP-Diaz showdown was undiminished, and the matchup was rescheduled following GSP's victory over Condit at UFC 158 in Montreal. The anticipation for Diaz, representing Stockton's fighting spirit, was at its peak. The pre-fight fervor, fueled by Diaz's notorious persona, had the audience primed for an epic clash.
Did you talk to Dana about it? Did he ask you about why you weren't there?
No, I'm sure he was upset. And
just one more question. You said you got in late on Tuesday night. Was it because of
Ariel,
yeah.
he's here.
Okay,
he's here. He's here now. You got any questions about the fight?
Obviously, it was a big story.
Yeah, he's here.
We spoke about it.
He's here
It's a part of the story.
I understand. Which part of what story?
Of this fight. A lot of people are interested in watching this press conference to see if Nick was going to show up because he wasn't there yesterday. So we would.
He's here today, and I guarantee you he'll be there tomorrow at the weigh-ins, and I guarantee you he will be there Saturday.
No one's doubting that, but just wanted to get the reason why.
You want to antagonize him. You want to aggravate him and get him pissed off.
That absolutely not.
It's totally the truth. That's why I knew what your question was right when I called it, right when you picked up the microphone. You never even ask questions first. You usually hang back and wait. Oh, you have to get that first question. You knew what you wanted.
God forbid.
You want to piss him off and aggravate him. Would you have any questions about the fight?
Not right now.
Okay. Next, please.
He was not alone in believing he could topple the welterweight legend. Unfortunately for him, when the fight unfolded, GSP's mastery in wrestling dictated the pace as he securely neutralized Diaz's offense and puts an end to any dispute. Nick Diaz's 5-year ban for marijuana use. In 2015, 2 years later following the loss to GSP, Nick Diaz's return to the UFC was a momentous event, not just for him, but for the entire MMA community. After a prolonged absence, he stepped back into the octagon to face Anderson Silva in the middleweight division at UFC 183. The fight, though lacking in consistent action, produced iconic moments, particularly Diaz's taunting of Silva in the first round. While Silva initially won by decision, both fighters tested positive for banned substances, leading to the bout being declared a no contest. The repercussions for Nick were severe. He received a 5-year suspension from the Nevada State Athletic Commission and a fine of $165,000 for his third marijuana-related offense.
How are you feeling right now?
I'm pretty pissed off. This commission, they've done everything they can to keep me from being all the way on top. So I've already beat guys who are on the top right now that people don't understand that I'm the best fighter in the world. They don't understand that. I wanted to, just get up and tell them all, like, look, you guys are way the fuck out of line. You guys have been trying to hold me down from day one. I'm the biggest draw. I'm the best fighter. They deprived me of not just money now, but the right to stand up for my little brother. I'm like, y'all can get knocked the fuck out. I don't want to be hateful or grateful over the suspension I went through because I served it anyways. And the verdict was like, I'm not the bad guy in the end. So I'm like, what the fuck is the problem?
This decision was met with widespread criticism from fans and fighters alike, many of whom saw the punishment as excessively harsh, especially when compared to penalties for performance-enhancing drugs.
I think that punishment was cruel, and people know that. I don't think that they should be testing for weed at all. It has nothing to do with sports. And they keep saying, like, oh, it's for the safety of the fighter, to make sure the fighter doesn't go out there, high and get injured. And I'm like, really? Then why aren't you testing us to make sure we're not drunk? You should test for performance-enhancing drugs only.
I thought it was horrible. And sometimes they break down some of the other things that guys have done, and then you compare it to what Nick has done. And I understand that Nick is a repeat offender, but there's no reason to, come on, 5 years. I think that was above and beyond. He is who he is, man. And that's why we all love him. Like, fighters love Nick Diaz. Like, we all love him because he lives his own, he is who he is. I think it's wrong, 100%. I think it's 100% wrong, and I hope it gets overturned.
I think it's ridiculous that he's getting punished more than somebody who's using, testosterone or EPO. It's like it's not even in the same ball. I hope that they, overturn his suspension. And
obviously, I think it's ridiculous that he's out for 5 years. I mean, that's that's pretty much life at this stage in his career.
Following appeals, his suspension was later reduced to 18 months and the fine was lowered to $100,000, allowing him to return to competition sooner. Nate moving the needle and Conor McGregor. With it looking like Nick's prime was finished following the loss and ban, it was time for Nate's prime to seemingly reboot. Following his loss to Benson Henderson in 2012, where he was outclassed for the lightweight title, Nate Diaz continued to face further major setbacks against Josh Thompson and Rafael dos Anjos. Despite beating Maynard in between, these losses painted a grim picture for his future in the sport. The loss to Thompson was particularly disheartening, as it was the first time Diaz had been stopped due to strikes in the UFC. The fight with dos Anjos was another tough outing, with Diaz being dominated throughout the match. These defeats, coupled with a year-long absence from the octagon, led many to speculate that his limitations had been exposed and that Nate's best days were behind him, and that a comeback was unlikely. Following these setbacks, UFC President Dana White famously remarked that Nate Diaz doesn't move the needle in terms of drawing power, casting doubt on Diaz's ability to be a major draw for the promotion.
Oh, that's cold.
You remember that one?
The kid makes really good money, and the unfortunate part is he's not a needle mover. His brother is a needle mover. If Nate Diaz was a massive needle mover, he'd be on the phone, we'd be figuring it out, and we'd work it out. He doesn't move the needle.
That's cold, Dana.
This comment would become a catalyst for Diaz, who went on to prove White wrong in spectacular fashion. After a year out, Nate returned to the octagon in late 2015 to face Michael Johnson at UFC on Fox 17. He would go on to win by unanimous decision, showing dominant striking ability. Following the fight, Nate would make a call out that would change not only his career, but his life, calling out Conor McGregor in a legendary speech laced with profanity.
Yeah, Conor McGregor, you're taking everything I work for, mother. I'm gonna fight your. You know what's the real fight? What's the real money fight is me.
Diaz's explicit, no-holds-barred challenge to McGregor was not just a call to fight, it was a proclamation that he was a force to be reckoned with. This moment is forever etched in the annals of MMA history as one of the most iconic call-outs ever. The subsequent fight between Diaz and McGregor at UFC 196 was a spectacle that captivated the MMA world.
You got that little goofy motherfucker with you. You're playing touch butt with that dork in the park. You seem to have it all figured out when you're fighting midget.
Diaz, taking the fight on short notice, showcased his exceptional skills by submitting McGregor with a rear naked choke in the second round, handing McGregor his first UFC loss.
He's got the challenge! Nate Diaz! He has done it! Nate Diaz beats Conor McGregor!
This upset was a shock to fans and pundits alike, and catapulted Diaz into the stratosphere of MMA stardom, all to which Nate replied,
Nate Diaz, you just shook up the world! How's that feel?
I'm not surprised, motherfuckers.
Their rematch soon followed 5 months later at UFC 202, which was an epic battle that went the distance, with McGregor winning by majority decision after 5 grueling rounds. The fight was a testament to both fighters' skill and heart, and it shattered pay-per-view records, proving unequivocally that Nate Diaz was indeed a needle mover, as verified later by Dana at UFC 241, following his win over Anthony Pettis. Diaz's rivalry with McGregor transcended the sport, drawing in fans from all corners and contributing significantly to the UFC's growth. It was a rivalry that not only proved Dana White's initial assessment wrong, but also highlighted Diaz's ability to captivate an audience and generate massive interest in his fights. The 2 bouts against McGregor solidified Diaz's status as a major draw and a key figure in the sport of MMA, cementing his status as a true needle mover, never to be doubted again.
You know, when you think that Nate, his 2 fights against Conor were among your biggest pay-per-view ever, and you heard this crowd tonight, it seemed like he was the main event. Do you think that we have another Rousey-McGregor level star with Nate Diaz?
Yeah. Pretty tough to deny. He's a needle mover now.
The fall of Nick Diaz. Despite the ban being shortened to 18 months, it looks like Nick Diaz's days were behind him. Along with that, so was his fighting spirit, stripped off him by the ban. Nick would spend a lot longer than 18 months out. After almost 7 years out, Nick started picking up the pieces he could of his shattered love for the sport. In September 2021, Diaz made a highly anticipated return at UFC 266 against Robbie Lawler, a rematch 17 years after their first encounter. The fight was a testament to Diaz's enduring popularity and the excitement he brings to the sport. As it was proven, he was not forgotten. However, the bout ended unusually in the 3rd round, when Diaz, after being knocked down by Lawler, chose not to continue.
What a fight. Oh! Right hand connection from Lawler. Something happened. They wobbled Diaz back to his feet. That's it. Diaz does not return to his feet. Robbie Lawler gets the win by TKO.
resulting in a TKO victory for Lawler. This fight was heartbreaking to some, as it showed how out of touch he was with the fighting game, marking the end of his legendary career. The 5-year ban, which many viewed as a lifetime ban due to its length, arguably robbed Diaz of his prime competitive years and the MMA fans of witnessing his full potential. His return fight against Lawler at UFC 266, although not victorious, was a display of the impact he has had on the sport. It also highlighted the significant changes in regulations and attitudes towards substances like marijuana, which have evolved since Diaz's initial suspension. Despite the setbacks, Diaz's legacy in MMA remains significant, and his influence continues to be felt both inside and outside the octagon. Nick Diaz's relentless pursuit of excellence and his willingness to confront any challenge have made him one of the most influential figures in MMA history. His contributions to the sport extend beyond his fight record, as he has played a pivotal role in shaping the conversation around athlete welfare and drug policy reform. His legacy is not just that of a fighter, but also of an advocate and a trailblazer who has left an indelible mark on the world of mixed martial arts. The fall of Nate Diaz. When one brother falls, the other sadly does. However, Nate's fall wouldn't come to be so tragic as his older brothers. For Nate, it would be somewhat mission accomplished. Nate would end up simply just seeing out his UFC contract, going 2-2 in his last 4 fights in the promotion. Fighting for the BMF belt, he suffered a doctor's stoppage against Jorge Masvidal at UFC 244 in 2019, and many argue he could have beat current welterweight champion Leon Edwards at UFC 263, but was simply just too busy being Nate Diaz, pointing to his stunned opponent, taunting him rather than going for the finish. In late 2022, his UFC career would round off with his last fight being a showdown against fellow legend Tony Ferguson at UFC 279, submitting him with 2:09 left on the clock, topping his career off with a reminder of the OG roots. Nate has now transitioned his career into boxing, where he fought Jake Paul in August of 2023, losing by unanimous decision and suffering a knockdown. Nate is scheduled to face Jorge Masvidal on June 1st in what will be their second fight, but this time it will be boxing. Nate Diaz's story in the UFC may have been a rollercoaster of highs and lows, but it concluded on a note that resonated with his enduring spirit. His final record in the promotion, an even split of wins and losses, belies the impact he had on the sport and the legion of fans he inspired. His battles, particularly the BMF title fight and the near miss against Leon Edwards, showcased his indomitable character and the Stockton slap bravado that made him a fan favorite. Now, as he ventures into the boxing ring, his fight against Jake Paul may not have gone his way, but it's clear that Nate's fighting days are far from over. His upcoming rematch with Jorge Masvidal in the boxing ring is not just another fight, it's an opportunity for redemption and another chance to prove that the Diaz spirit never fades. It's a testament to Nate's resilience and his unwavering commitment to compete, entertain, and leave it all in the ring, no matter the arena. Ultimately, the Diaz brothers, Nick and Nate, have carved out a legacy that transcends the confines of the octagon. Their journey, marked by trials and triumphs, has captivated fans and reshaped the landscape of mixed martial arts. From the streets of Stockton to the bright lights of the biggest arenas, they have fought with unyielding spirit and an authenticity that has endeared them to millions. Nick, the elder, blazed a trail with his no-nonsense attitude and formidable skills, becoming a symbol of resilience and a pioneer for fighters' rights. Nate, following in his brother's footsteps, emerged as a star in his own right, challenging the status quo and proving that he could move the needle on the grandest stages, contrary to one's beliefs. Their story is not just about the fights they won or lost, but about the indomitable will they displayed and the cultural impact they made. They showed that with enough grit and determination, anyone could rise to the top. As they transition to new chapters in their career, the legacy within the UFC remains a testament to their contribution to the sport and the enduring mark they've left on the hearts of fight fans around the world. In the end, the Diaz brothers' story is a chronicle of two warriors from Stockton who became legends, not just for their victories, but for the way they fought, lived, and inspired a generation of fighters and fans alike. It's a story of fighting against the odds, never backing down, and always staying true to oneself. The Diaz brothers may have walked different paths, but their journey together will forever be etched in the annals of MMA history. If you like the content, please subscribe to our channel and turn on those notifications. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.